What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Scratch Agency podcast, hosted by Scratch Agents for Scratch Agents. Today, we are super excited to have Jessica Fukuchi on the show with us today. Jessica is the president of PCRG Insurance, which is a fully remote agency that specializes in high net worth clients. Jessica and her family split time between Washington, Utah, Arizona, and Hawaii, which is where she's calling in from today. She is married to her husband, Kyle, who is a financial advisor, and they have 4 beautiful children ranging from 2 to 11 years old. So can't wait to hear all that free time you have, Jessica, to run the agency. Jessica has 15 years of industry experience. She started out captive and started her Scratch independent agency just 6 years ago. So, Jessica, thank you for taking the time to join us on the Scratch Agency podcast, and welcome to the show. How are you today?
So good. Like you said, I'm here in Hawaii, and it's a solid 81 degrees on the dot all week, and it's nice and sunny, and watching the World Cup, and can't complain.
Yeah, it's a good 30 degrees over here, Steven, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm only about 3 hours east of Buffalo. Got the record 77 inches of snow over the last 2 days. So we only have a dusting where I'm at, but we're close enough that I can feel it.
Wow.
But
So Jessica,
we'll try to get you done so we can catch the second half of the USA game at least.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So, Jessica, past the bio on what we said, why don't you just introduce yourself more to the listeners, talk about your agency, and then we'll dive into the specifics that we wanted to touch on.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, agency has been around for 6 years. I originally started out captive. My husband and I saw a need to develop. So our agency actually was created to support financial advisors in the financial planning process. And so when we launched the agency and developed out our systems and processes, it was with that in mind. And we've definitely grown and expanded outside of just servicing that niche. But that is where that's the main purpose of what we were founded to do. So that's been a fun and exciting journey, just figuring out what that unique setup looked like in order to embed ourselves into financial planning firms and bring our consultants or our agents up to speed on how to support the financial planning process and to come raw new into the business and step straight into complex planning, insurance planning, high net worth planning, and get over those barriers that I would say a lot of agents that are 15, 20, 30 years in are still struggling with getting over. So that's definitely been an exciting thing and a challenge.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And Jessica, what's your book made up of now, if you had to guess a percentage? Like, is it mainly personal, a little split between personal and commercial?
Yeah, so it's a split between personal and commercial. I would say it's about a 70-30 split. We didn't launch our commercial division until about 3.5 years ago. And
okay.
So, and most of the commercial stuff that we have coming in is purely from servicing the personal lines clients that we do. So
Gotcha.
We're not super robust in going out and aggressively marketing commercial lines, but it comes with those specific clients wanting the same agency to control
Gotcha.
everything.
Gotcha. And how do you develop, so financial advisors is your main business referral partner, right? And
Yeah.
shout out to Billy Williams. He's the one who, when I first opened my agency a few years ago, and I'm embarrassed to say it, but I was in the industry almost 10 years before I even knew what a business referral partner was. Yes, that sounds crazy, but it's the truth. So when I opened up my agency, Billy's like, yeah, you got to get 6 or 7 business referral partners for certain niches, blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, oh, my God. But now seeing how beneficial that can be to both sides, the agency and the business referral partner specifically, how did you how did you get financial advisors to work with you? Like, what did that process look like?
Yeah, so, I mean, that's a conversation all on its own. But our agency is referral only and has been since day one. And so all of our whole team, regardless if they're working with mortgage lenders, real estate agents, financial advisors, property managers, whatever it is, it's about building out the referral relationship and the value statement. But specifically for financial advisors is understanding just how you fit into their process. And I really think what it comes down to is that for some reason financial advisors have been put on this like pedestal of being really terrifying to reach out to and work with. They don't know what to say. You don't have the markets to support the client base. And I think breaking down those barriers and understanding that most financial advisors, they never get reached out. Like they are very rarely contacted by a PNC agent to even start a relationship. And
that's a good point.
That's really where you start is from the very bottom of just reaching out. And I think that you'd be shocked at how many have never heard of, PNC being integrated into their practice, and a lot of the things that you're going to be saying is new to them. It's not like they've been shutting it down since the beginning.
Walk us through how you had that conversation. So, like, how do you think us agents can do a better job at pitching ourselves to the financial advisors?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think that just reaching out and just purely asking them if they have adopted PNC into their. Can you hear my husband? Something's happening with the game.
Did they
right
score?
now.
I was going to say.
Those weren't happy sighs, so I'm going to assume not. But
I was thinking that's how I should go walk into a financial advisor's office, just like that, and that's exactly how they want to partner with me.
Exactly. So no, just asking the question: have they already partnered with the PNC agency? Or are they looking at liability? The biggest thing is to not lead with just have you shopped it, but lead with liability and lead with protecting the work that they're doing for their clients.
Their assets.
And yeah, so ripping $1 million out of their financial plan makes a huge indent on the overall planning and the work that they're doing for those clients.
Yeah.
And they have a financial obligation and a fiduciary obligation if they're positioning themselves as a comprehensive financial advisor, and they are protecting from wealth eroding factors. Obviously, a big liability claim is something that they should be addressing as a wealth eroding factor. And so I think just making them aware that just having the conversation, have you implemented it into your process and your practice, and here's why you should, because you would never have a financial plan that you didn't talk about taxes, you didn't talk about death, you didn't talk about disability. But why would you not cover a lawsuit or a liability exposure in that plan? And usually it's pretty eye-opening for most of those advisors that they'll open the door for a conversation.
Well, it's like selling with the story, right?
Yeah.
It's the same, when you're talking to your client about trying to sell them that umbrella and selling with the story. I think it's a similar standpoint to sell with the story about what could happen to their clients. So I think that's a really good piece of advice.
Yeah, and I think that the difference between, and I know like Jason Kilgo does it well, leading with liability and leading with the umbrella for their clients, but I think it's equally as important for your referral partners to also be leading, not with cost, but with liability, and having those same stories with your advisors and how it's going to impact their practice and their clients' lives and whatnot. And leading with liability with them too is really important. So not just your clients, but your referral partners as well.
Gotcha. And Jessica, just to get a little more granular, how are you finding, it doesn't have to be the financial advisor specifically, but how are you finding your business referral partner? Is it strictly referrals from other, business referral partners that you're working with, or is it people from networking groups? Like, how do you find your business referral partners?
Yeah, so I think everybody on my team has a little bit of a different approach as to how they're doing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when we onboard anyone, there's 3 buckets that they are expected to fill when they join our team. One of the buckets or one of the funnels that they have to fill is referral sources, right? Whether that's going out and doing networking groups, whether it's me personally, I live a super I just network in general. I have a lot of things going on, and so I've lived my entire career that every person that I meet is either a potential client or a potential referral partner, and I try to walk away from every single interaction with what my follow-up plan is.
Smart.
and that's been really good for me. I have other people on my team that, like I said, they attend networking groups. They maybe have a spouse that work in that they lean on their social media factors, and they, you know, when they first get in, they're asking their social platforms for their recommendations on who they've done like their loans with or who they've done their financial planning, and warming the conversation up of just, you know, John and Jill Smith recommended you to me, so you're at least not making a cold call. You're building on common ground of, you know, they had great things to say about you. I'm looking for a partnership, and based off of what they had to say, I think you're someone that I would want to work with. Can I take you to lunch? Right? So there's referral sources and networking everywhere that you are. You just have to learn how to identify the opportunity as where it fits in your life.
So let's back up a little bit to your journey. You've had 15 years in the industry, just started your scratch agency 6 years ago. You were with a captive before. So why don't you talk to us about the early days of Jessica in the insurance industry and some of the things you faced then?
Early days in the...
Even your captive side, yeah. I mean, like, even just sharing that experience of, I know there's a lot of people that are like, yeah, it was great, I learned a lot, but, you know, there's a reason I went independent, or, you know, I don't want to look back at that. But there's a lot of the conversations I've at least had, there's a ton that they take from it, right? Because the models are so different. So I'm just curious your take on what those captive days were like, and then we can jump into kind of this the agency side of setting it up.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I started out, I've sat in every role within an agency. So I actually started out as a CSR, never thought I would get in insurance, much like most people. Got recruited in, and then quickly actually converted into a sales role, and then even quicker opened my own captive agency. Sat in that for 5 years. Then I moved to the leadership side within American Family, and just quickly realized that I wanted to be able to control my book a bit more at that point. And so I decided that being in leadership wasn't going to be my long term, and I came to the crossroads of realizing I either had to go back and inherit an American Family book, which I could have done, or walk away from it all. And that's what I did. I walked away with nothing. Like, I had just a huge leap of faith. I didn't have a book. I didn't have an income, and just decided that I wanted to have control of my future and how I sold. However, I mean, I think a lot of times in the captive world, right, that I always say, like, they did a good thing for me. They gave me my training wheels. Somebody took a huge, giant leap of faith in me. I was 19 when I got into the industry,
Wow.
and I was 21 when I launched my agency. And so that was a really big leap of faith that somebody took on a very inexperienced young woman in Utah, let alone where not a ton of female agency owners. So, yeah, so I think it gave me a lot of the foundation in order to launch a captive agency. But then when you also launch an independent agency, then you realize that, wow, they handle so much for you. Right? Like, I remember very early on them being like, hey, you need to set up an Ivans account. And I was like, a what?
I'm still like, what?
So just all of those things, that your website, your payroll, just your commissions, your accounting, your phones, like, it was all taken care of for you. And then all of a sudden you launch this independent agency and you realize that it takes so much more than just being good at insurance.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that was the biggest eye-opening thing for me, was like, oh, I have to learn how to do automation. I have to learn how to, really robustly drive my Google reviews and make sure that everything is connected, and all of those things that I never even once thought of in a captive agency, because it's all taken care of for me. So I think that was my biggest learning thing, was like, wow, like, I'm a legit business owner now. Before, it was I was really good at insurance, but I wasn't great at being a business owner. And so that's over the last 6 years what I've had to figure out how to do, was not just the insurance, but how to run a business.
When you started your scratch agency, it was just you then?
Just for a few months, and then I brought on my first person like 3 months in.
Cool. So walk.
He's my operations manager now.
That's awesome. Yeah. So walk us through the evolution of the agency from just you to, you know, where you are today.
Yeah. So started just me. Really worked on. Spent those first few months working on systems and operations and getting all of that set up before I needed it, before I had staff and before I had clients and issues. And that's probably the biggest advice that I would give to a new agency owner starting out, whether you're on the captive side or the independent side, is run it day one like you are 5 years in, and how you envision that. Because it is really easy to turn a canoe. It's really hard to turn the Titanic, right? And so when you need to implement change and you're realizing that something's just not working, or that you need a system and a process for something, it's a lot easier to do when you're early on and envisioning it than trying to make a bunch of changes and getting your entire staff to buy into those changes. And so setting it up day one, how you want it to look when you have that team in place, that's been a huge thing for me and my success, is that I spent a majority of my time early on not selling, but building out the processes and the systems so that when we did turn that faucet on, we could handle the volume that was coming from it.
Gotcha. And Jessica, how did you, I'm going to play devil's advocate here because you always hear this other side of the story, but oh my God, Jessica, how did you get any revenue in the doors those first couple of months? How did you have money saved up from the previous job? I'm just curious because I know everyone's situation is so different.
Yeah, I mean, I was still selling, but you know, I mean, just having revenue in the bank, being able to manage that, and obviously, you have to make a decision when you choose to transition and what that financially looks like for you. I chose to take a step back, really get things set up before, and it paid off, because I think that we were able to write way higher volume in those early days, more than we would have with the systems and processes. So I took a step back for 3 months, but the amount of volume we were able to take on, because it was so systematized, was when we actually started writing business, was a lot more than any one person, 2 people could have handled.
Gotcha.
Yeah, those are such good points. I think about right now, I'm 6 months in, and it's just me. And exactly what you're saying is what I'm doing. It's like, all right, I'm got this new company I'm working with, and I'm going to take a Tango video of how to issue this policy, and like getting all of that done, because my past life in my family business was essentially me trying to turn around that Titanic. I mean, very open and honest. There was the old mentality of doing business, me trying to introduce new ways, and it was an uphill battle every day. And again, not that that agency was operating in a wrong way. It's just a different way that I envision of operating a business. One of the things I want to touch on is you're 100% remote. So have you been 100% remote from the beginning? And, you know, what are your keys to success of running that way? Because I think COVID made a lot of agencies have to go that way and struggle to go that way and to operate the same way. So I'm just curious of how you run your team so successfully at 100% remote.
Yeah, so yes and no, we've always been that way. So we did have touchdown spaces. So there were people going into the office on like designated days of the week or just to hold meetings. And then when COVID hit, we dissolved all of those like touchdown offices, but we never required anybody to physically come in. So when COVID actually hit, it wasn't as big of a deal for us. We were able to pivot and transition pretty quickly just because we had the remote technology already set up and embedded. So it was just, shutting the brick and mortar services down essentially. what I find is that I recruit to that as a benefit. That is the number one thing that people want to join my team for. And I live it, right? I post pictures of myself all the time on social media and followers, and my team does as well. Like, I'm like, listen, we really do live that work from anywhere lifestyle, right? I target the people on my team that value that same lifestyle, and that's who is a part of my team, right? So I think that would be really hard to be shifting if you're not, but I can't expect my team to be in the office when I'm no longer willing and able to, right? They see me jet setting, they see me all over all the time. Nobody ever knows where we're at. And the beauty of that is that nobody on my team can say, wow, Jessica's doing that and she's not working. Like, they have the same flexibility, the same ability to do so.
That's cool.
And with that comes with letting go of the reins a little bit, right? And I talk to a lot of agency owners that, you know, they just don't feel like they have the personality to let go, or I really embody and live by we track tasks and not time. And I think that that's really important in the remote world. If you're going to go fully remote, is that you're really tracking those tasks over time, because if you're going to track time in a remote environment, you're going to drive yourself crazy trying to figure out what they're doing during their time.
So from a management standpoint, are there certain things that you, like you just said, letting up the reins a little bit? I think that's super, super interesting. So are there certain metrics that you measure on as far as your staff, or is it basically just your goals are hit, these things are done, you know, good to go?
Yeah, so I mean, I definitely have internal KPIs that I look at, right? So we can still see how many calls they're taking, how many calls they're missing, how many calls, right? So those are things to coach to and make adjustments in a remote environment to, and how many tasks are getting assigned to them, and what is the turnaround time on those tasks, and, you know, having them being completed. And so those are always things that you're going to have to manage, but I think those are things that you have to manage whether you're in a remote environment or in a, you know, in a physical brick and mortar and you're together. And so as long as you have the technology to be able to track those things that are important to you in that environment, then it works.
Yeah, absolutely.
Gotcha. Jessica, are you utilizing, I'm just curious because I have a VA, obviously it's 100% virtual, and a lot of the training we did in the beginning was, this is kind of back to what you were saying before about having the training plan built out before I even had her on board. So I literally did tasks, used Loom for each task, so she had like a video on exactly how to do a basic certificate of insurance and things like that. What kind of technology are you utilizing to help training with the 100% virtual employees?
Yeah, so it totally depends whether it is a salesperson or a service person. So if it is in our servicing team, we keep our teams completely siloed. So we don't have our salespeople doing any service. Once that policy is bound and closed, it moves on into the service division. But we have the very similar setup, where it's a Loom video library. I didn't actually create that, and so that is something that I put onto my service team, is to build it out, right? And
nice.
To record their screen when they're processing a change and when they're doing something. Not to say that we're not always evolving and changing. So we are making some pretty big, robust changes in this next coming year to our service team. And the main reason why is because when we first launched, for the first 5-6 years of our agency, we were a sales organization, right? We were focused on a lot of sales, and we had to have those processes honed in. And so a lot of my focus was on that. And now I feel like the pendulum's changing a bit, where we have those sales processes very honed in, and things, you know, obviously with recession and whatnot, things tend to be changing a little bit. And so it's giving me the time to really refine those service processes, where before, yes, we had a Loom video training library, but the future for my service team looks like everybody processes the change the exact same way, right? And so working with my automation consultant to build out like policy change forms for every type of change so that the exact same question is being asked. You know, if a vehicle change comes in, they're all asking the exact same questions to cover that like E&O exposure and make it this, because they've been trained on it, but are they saying the same things? Are they asking the same questions? They're not, right? And so how do I manage that process a bit better? So that's what we're working on.
Gotcha.
All right. Well, Jessica, last question, because we want to be respect your time. Make sure you catch the second half of that game. Last question we have for you today. If you woke up tomorrow morning, we're faced with the challenge to start another scratch agency, what is one thing that you would do differently?
Oh, that's a tough question. I would, I would focus more on that's just where I'm living right now. I would focus more on the servicing side. I had commented a lot on running the agency 5 years out of where I wanted it to look. And I feel like I did a really good job from the sales component. But I would really figure out from what the entire client experience, what I want the entire client experience to look like for the life cycle of their experience, and not just the new client experience. And that's what I'm dealing with the most, is that it's a really great experience. But yeah, to start it again, I would envision and plan out what I want the entire client experience to be. Because as new scratch agencies, right, we are so focused on the new business, and what that client experience is, and how do we differentiate ourselves. And it's not until we get 5, 6, 7, 8 years in that we're really like, wow, I've now got that shift of I've got to change the current client experience, and how do we handle rewrites, the 3-year rewrites, where it seems like when you get 3 years in, all of a sudden your entire book needs to be rewritten to a new carrier, and like, how do you handle those things? So I would be more forward thinking, and not just how I'm going to grow the agency, but how I'm going to run that client experience for the life cycle of that.
I like that.
That's great.
And then casting it, I guess the other thing I would do different is I would cast a deeper net instead of a wider net, in the sense that not just taking anything and everything, but setting those agency standards of like, we're not going to write monoline, because now we don't write monoline anymore, but we have a big monoline book that we did in the early stages that that's hard to clean up and re-underwrite and go through all over again. So setting those agency standards and expectations early on for everyone on your team is something else that I would definitely change.
That's gold. That's a great way to wrap it up. Jessica, thank you very much for joining us today. For people that want to either connect with you or just follow along, what's a good way to connect with you?
You can email me if you have questions. It's jessica@PCRGinsurance.com. Or you can follow me on social media, I guess. I don't really post much insurance stuff, but I post a lot of travel.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. Shawn, do you have anything to add before we wrap this up?
No, that's it. Thanks, Jessica. It was awesome to hear your story and hear about the monoline accounts you have, too, because I'm in the same boat right now. In the first year, I purchased a lot of homeowners leads. And God, now I have a lot of monoline home. And it's funny, I set up my renewal process, and I have like a monoline a renewal column. And it's basically just filled with people. I'm like, oh my God, I have to follow up with all these people to try to cross-sell and whatnot.
It's
and
funny
retain
you say that,
it, you know?
I've been having conversations with my team and trying to like open their eyes, especially now as the industry is shifting. And I'm like, their auto is somewhere. And if you're not going to cross-sell that account, that other agent is going to. So is it going to be you, or is it going to be the other agent? Because right now, that's where everybody's turning.
Yep.
So that's where we're. But okay, well, thank
Absolutely.
you so much for your time and for having me. And yeah, let me know if you guys have any additional questions or follow up.
We appreciate it. All right, everybody, that's another episode of the Scratch Agency Podcast. Make sure to follow Jessica and reach out to her if you have any questions on today's episode. Thanks for joining us. Do us a favor, like the show, share the show, and subscribe. Most importantly, remember to dig down deep, believe in yourself, and own your own future. We'll see you next week. Take care.
Thank you so much for listening or watching that episode of the Scratch Agency Podcast. We really hope you enjoyed it, and we hope to see you next time. If you have any questions, you can reach out to myself or Steven on Instagram or LinkedIn, and we'll see you next week.